All right. That was fairly
All
quick.
that pressure was built.
Get back to it, man. Yeah, here we find a man who's, you know, heir to the throne. His brother passed on. He's got a whole bunch of negative situations going on. Scandalous sort of marriage. Hold on. I'm still explaining the summary, bro. Whole bunch of scandalous kind of situations going on, and now he's doubting things like his marriage. You know what I'm saying? Having to even marry his brother's widow. You're talking about King Henry VIII. You know what I mean? Now, kicking it back off. Let's go.
And diplomatic failures that kind of isolated England even more, and by the growing belief that God was punishing him for marrying his brother's widow. All that pressure was building towards this moment that would just change England forever, and it would all begin with one man.
Hold on. We can go ahead and title this one the moment that changed England forever. During the rule of Tyrant Henry. Let's do it, Tyrant Henry.
His obsession and one woman who refused to be the side piece. Now, Anne Boleyn wasn't considered a classic Tudor beauty. Not if you listen to the people writing at the time. According to descriptions, which again, I'm not bashing a woman here. She had dark eyes, a long neck, slim, striking face. But what really set her apart was her mind. And in a court where women were kind of just expected to like smile and wave and stay quiet, this sharp mind could be dangerous. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break real quick because we got to have some...
What happened to the sharp mind?
Ancient lakes. It is an anti-pop term that leads... They don't do like the...
I need the sharp mind.
Dandruff. And doesn't work for you.
Okay, shut up.
I wasn't really sleeping that great.
Whoa. 3 ads back to back is crazy.
You know, how she says subtle and strategic and intellectual. So when Henry culture and politics and... Or you can just go to Marsmen and get it all in one case. Now, let's get back to the show. Anne had spent years in the French court, absorbing culture and politics and understanding this social game. She learned how influence works and, you know, how to be subtle and strategic and intellectual. So when Henry VIII started pursuing her in 1526, she did something that no one saw coming. The king's like, yo, can I get that? And she says, nah. She goes,
Nigga said he wanted to crack that.
Not like a timid, like, oh, I mustn't, but like a firm, like, no, I'm not going to be your side piece. I'm not going to be a mistress. If he wanted her, you gotta wife me up. Put a ring on it. And that decision, as simple as it sounds, lit the fuse that would basically blow apart the English courts. And
polygamy? No. You're telling me he started considering polygamy?
Really the entire religious landscape of Europe. Henry was obsessed. He wanted what he couldn't have. We still have the letters he wrote to her. Emotional and frustrated and like kind of needy, especially for like a king. This was a guy who never got told no in his life and suddenly is begging for the attention of a woman who just kind of kept him at a distance. Which, I'm just saying, if there's any ladies listening, you can use...
And you know he's finna be tight about that shit. He's finna be tight about that. You trying to play hard to get with me? Because we gotta remember, even from the first segment, right? Homie that changed his whole life. From the reign of his dad, knowing that it was 2 boys. It was Arthur and himself, and then Arthur passed on, right? R.I.P. Arthur. He knew that he was up next for that throne. He even, he went through all that effort to be the high value figure that he was. High value, right? Come on. Got in shape. Mastered all these skills. You know what I'm saying? Highly intellectual, highly educated, highly knowledgeable. All in all, just like a fit candidate for that throne. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? But now when it comes to just like a woman, bruh, like you gonna give me a run for my money? Like, make me work hard for this? Like, do you know who I am, ho? No. It's like, okay. Like, it's unnecessary, but like, I'm just like kind of imagining how it felt for a guy of his caliber. You feel what I mean? Kind of stung.
Use that to your advantage. right? It worked on Henry VIII. Like
Yep.
it'll work on
Okay.
Joe that is a mechanic or something. Like just be like, hey, I'm good. But
This works on me every day.
yeah, right. It happens. Like you want what you can't have. That's natural. But Anne was not playing hard to get. She was playing to win. Her sister Mary had been Henry's mistress and was just kind of discarded whenever he was bored. And Anne refused to have the same fate.
Her sister Mary. How many females was this hairy guy dealing with, bro? And was that guy a womanizer at the same time? It's crazy.
Wanted legitimacy and security and ultimately to climb this political game and have children who would eventually inherit the throne.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Henry has a problem. That's wife, Catherine of Aragon, which these wives always getting in the way. You know what I mean? Of you just smashing this French courtier. What a shame, right?
Yeah.
Henry didn't need a divorce because at the time, divorce wasn't even a thing. Like in Catholic Europe, like you can't get divorced. What he needs is an annulment. Now, an annulment it sounds specific and pedantic, but it is a significant thing.
But let me try and guess. Is it a permission to be in a polygamous type situation?
So an annulment basically says that the marriage never happened in the first place.
Okay.
So there's a few things within church doctrine that will allow for an annulment, but as the Catholics say, what is united by God can't be separated by man.
Yeah, okay.
So his argument was scripture. Leviticus 20:21. He says that basically it warns that if a man marries his brother's widow, the marriage will be childless. And he's like, hey, check this out. Now, Henry is conveniently ignoring the fact that he did have a child, Mary. But in his mind, the lack of sons meant that it is, effectively childless and that God was cursing his marriage.
Yeah.
Now, Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, Henry's chief minister, was given this impossible task of trying to get an annulment and going to the Pope and being like, hey, this marriage was illegitimate. He's actually not married. Now, Wolsey was one of the most powerful men in Europe. He was rich and brilliant and even feared in some circles, but even he couldn't solve this. But the Pope had a bigger problem. Catherine's nephew, remember this guy Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor? He had recently sacked Rome. He was essentially holding the Pope hostage. And there was no universe in which Clement VII could declare Charles' aunt's marriage invalid and her daughter illegitimate. So, to make that make sense, the Pope's in a tough spot, right? If he says, hey, this whole thing is, actually not the case, then all of a sudden he's one hostage by Charles, and he's basically saying like, hey, your aunt is illegitimately married, and as a result, their kid is a bastard child. So the Pope is stalled, and as a result, he's delaying, and he's just hoping that this whole thing would kind of blow over, but it doesn't. Wolsey fought for years to secure this annulment, but failed, and Henry ultimately turned on him. And in 1529, Wolsey was stripped of his offices. By 1530, he was arrested for treason, specifically for corresponding with Rome and the Pope without royal permission, a charge that showed just how quickly Henry's priorities had shifted from sort of, making the Pope happy to just trying to dominate them. Yeah. Now, Wolsey died on his way to London, avoiding an execution that was almost certainly going to happen.
Damn, was it that deep? Was it that freaking deep, bro? I mean, bro, it wasn't even his fault, bro. The Pope was in a tough spot. Oh my God, bro! You telling me people got to the brink of losing their lives over, the scandalous nature of a man's marital nature, or marital situation? That's crazy. All these connections, bro. This guy was pretty much a womanizer, man. You know what I mean? But then again, if I'm him, I'm in a sexless marriage, yo. I'm in a sexless marriage, bro. I think even the Bible itself says, if you got the urges, if you got things like sexual, it's good. I think it's in Paul, somewhere what Paul wrote, right? It's good to be by yourself as a man, but if you got these sexual urges, get married, have a wife, and things like this, shit is biblical, right? And we talking Roman England, you know what I mean? The Roman Empire. So everything is religious anyway. You feel what I'm saying? But then now with this whole situation where I've married my brother's widow, right? Chances are I might not be because I never initiated the connection with my brother's woman. It was my brother's business, you know, before he died. You understand what I'm saying? It had nothing to do with me. So obviously, it may just be asexual, this marriage. You know, but then now I'm trying to go do my thing with people that I want to do my thing with, bro. Man, come on, quit playing. Tell the Pope, you know what I'm saying? Make this marriage null and void, bro. It's nothing going on anyways. Right? I'm trying to dip out and go have some fun. Do you blame, you know what I'm saying? So he was in a pretty tough position, but now the fact that, yo, Catherine's nephew, what kind of power did he have? What Prince Charles? Is it Prince Charles? Hold on. Let me kind of find that out here with co-pilot right quick. Co-pilot. So, are you familiar with? Is it Prince Charles? Whose nephew again?
King Charles III is currently the king.
Catherine. Is it Catherine's nephew, King Charles? Charles. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. King Charles is the uncle of Catherine, Princess of Wales, through her marriage to Prince William.
So what was the situation with him holding the Pope hostage?
There's actually no situation where King Charles held the Pope hostage. That's not something that's happened, and there's no evidence of any event like that.
Whoa, history can't, hold on.
He died.
What are you saying?
Making the Pope happy to just try responding with Rome, and the Pope, without royal permission, ultimately turned on him. And in 1529, he's just hoping that this whole thing would kind of blow over, but it doesn't. Wolsey fought for years to secure this annulment, but failed. And Henry ultimately turned on him. And in 1529, Wolsey was stripped of his offices. By 1530, he was arrested.
Wait, what did he say?
Their
what did
kid
he say here,
is
man?
a bastard child. So the Pope is stalled, and as a result,
Pope is stalled. Wait,
he's delaying, and he's just hoping that this whole thing would kind of blow over, but it doesn't. Wolsey fought for years to secure this annulment, but failed. And Henry ultimately turned on him. And in 1529, Wolsey was stripped of his offices. By 1530, he was arrested for treason, specifically for corresponding with Rome and the Pope without royal permission, a charge that showed just how quickly Henry's priorities had shifted from sort of, making the Pope happy to just trying to dominate them. Now, Wolsey died on his way to London, avoiding an execution that was almost certainly going to happen. Before he died, he reportedly said, "If I had served God as diligently as I have the king," which is a pretty perfect summary of life under Henry VIII, that he could bring you up, but he could also destroy you just as quick. Now, with Wolsey gone, Henry decided to take matters into his own hands, right? If the Pope is not going to give him the annulment in order to get a new wife, to have a son, to maintain his power, then the Pope's got to go. And
ultimately, was trying to execute the Pope?
England is going to rule itself. The church's foundation is now cracking. New books, vernacular Bibles, blistering critiques of corruption, hints of Luther's ideas are now coming into England. Even some of Henry's own courtiers were quietly reading them, wondering if Rome might not be the unshakable power that it claimed to be. Now, here's the part that people misunderstand.
What is it?
That Henry wasn't this Protestant revolutionary. His beliefs stayed conservative. Mass and sacraments, ritual, all these things that a Catholic boy would hold on to. He didn't break with Rome out of faith. He broke with Rome out of control. And he wanted total control. So, by 1534, Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, declaring Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. And again, this isn't about religion, this is about power, control of the doctrine.
Wait, so did he execute the Pope, or was it just this act that was just activated, right? What did he do to that Pope, man?
In the appointments and the land, and ultimately who's allowed to divorce who. Now, by this point, Henry had already secretly married Anne Boleyn in January 1533, and great news, she's pregnant. In September, she gave birth, and Henry had convinced himself that God is going to give him a son, and he didn't. And delivered a daughter by the name of Elizabeth. And the disappointment, as you can imagine, is immediate. Oh, that gender reveal would have been awesome. I mean, all time, just Henry in the background.
Damn.
So, Henry's pissed, but he decides to push forward, right? Anne is now the queen. Catherine is downgraded to Princess Dowager, which is a tough name. And Mary is declared under, the monarchy of England as illegitimate. And then came one of the biggest shocks in English history.
What was it?
The dissolution of the monasteries. So, starting in 1536, Henry's new minister, Thomas Cromwell, began dismantling monastic life across England. Now, Cromwell was very smart and extremely loyal to Henry's vision, but also extremely ruthless. Commissioners toured the monasteries and returned with exactly the kind of accusations that Cromwell needed, which is immorality and disloyalty and corruption. Smaller monasteries were shut down first. Their lands were confiscated, given over to the king, and then the larger ones fell one by one. And by 1540, every monastery in England was gone. I mean, just the numbers of this are crazy. 800 religious houses, churches, rectories, everything destroyed. 12,000 monks, nuns, and friars were displaced. Priceless manuscripts just burned and lost forever. Medieval buildings just stripped and abandoned. And in this whole shakeup, the crown gained roughly 1.3 million pounds, roughly $500 million in today's money. And Henry spent it all almost immediately. For ordinary people, the impact was pretty clear, right? I mean, you have to think, all these people in England had been Catholic for generations.
Right.
And these monasteries provided, charity and hospitals and schools and helped poor people. And then suddenly all those safety nets are gone. Meanwhile, prices are climbing as, these debased coins are now flooding the market, and saying the wrong thing about the king or new religious charges are going to get you killed. So now fear is the predominant force of daily life.
Snap.
Like with most tyrannical
So he ended up controlling through fear.
regimes, resistance is crushed without hesitation. The abbots of Glastonbury, Reading, and Colchester were executed when they refused to surrender. When 3,000 to 50,000 Northerners rose up and said, no, we're not having it, and this is known as the Pilgrimage of Grace, they demanded the monasteries to return, and Henry kind of pretended to negotiate and then executed their leaders once the crowds were dispersed. Roughly 200 people were killed in this single event. Even Henry's old friends were not spared. Thomas More, who was one of the most brilliant...
Not even your friends could survive it? That's crazy, bro. Homie done turned into an animal. That's crazy.
Brilliant minds of the time. He even helped educate this young prince. He refused to recognize Henry as the head of the church, and he was executed in 1535. Fun fact, that's who I'm named after. My middle name's Thomas. My mom named me after Thomas More.
I'm not named after him.
Okay,
Yeah,
Thomas.
that's my middle name.
Not,
The mic just fell. See?
What?
Thank you, God. I'm just saying, this is the guy that, look, anytime the king's like, hey, I'm actually the head of the church, it rolls in my mind where I'm like, hey, I'm going to actively fight against that. This is who I am. Anyway, Bishop John Fisher met the same end. And what made it worse was how official it all looked. Henry used the parliament. Like, he was going through government systems and he was twisting the law so that loyalty wasn't just about behavior